Kyle, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. How you been?
Doing good, Patrick. Glad to be back on with you again.
2025 starting off, I'm sure it's starting off busy for you. Getting into nice warm weather, race season, towing season, all that sort of stuff. So things are, picking up in the motorsports world and everything else. I'm sure you'll be busy.
Seems like it never ends, man. It's like the break in between is very short, and we're off and running again. So, yeah, excited about it though. It's new year and a bunch of new stuff coming, so we're excited.
I love covering the topic of fuel additives because there's so many different parts of it that people are really either passionate about or they don't know a lot about. It seems to be one or the other. You're normally not kind of in the middle. It's either, you love a particular product and you've used it for 10 years or 20 years or even longer, or somebody doesn't know anything about them. They just kind of heard in passing about lubricity or about cetane or different things like that. So I thought it would be cool to talk with you and ask you, like, what are some top myths or like the top 5 myths that you found, Hot Shot Secrets has found, exist out there when it comes to fuel additives? Because I'm curious to see maybe some of them I've seen on comments on YouTube or on social media or just in conversations with people, or maybe some that I don't even know. But I thought that'd be cool for somebody who is maybe new to diesel, or they're looking to maintain their truck in a better way or more efficient way, and they're kind of lost right now. And I thought we could help them.
Let's do it, man. It's story of my life. It's There's a lot of myths about diesel fuel additives, and I guess that's my job to try to dispel those myths. So, yeah, I like it. Let's do it.
What would you say is I don't want to say that one is more prevalent or common than the other, but what would be the one that you would start with that, maybe you hear out on the road or you guys get calls about, or you wish people knew more about?
That one's easy. Do you even need a diesel fuel additive? That's the number one that you get all the time. You get the people that are diehard, never used a diesel fuel additive before. Why do I need one? I've never had a problem. Uh, is it all snake oil? Does it actually do anything? And then, like you said, you got other people that religiously, use additives and swear by them. And so I always try to address that question. Do you really need to be using a fuel additive? And I guess I kind of break that one down between your wants and your needs. Um, I would like to feel, as a lubricant manufacturer, that everybody needs this product. A lot of people kind of more look at it as oh, it could be beneficial, but it's not necessary. I think there's two parts that have kind of crossed over in like the information that's got out there where people are additive users, and that's with anti-gel. I get a lot of people say, oh, I don't believe in fuel additives. I don't need anything, but I do put some anti-gel in the winter. It's like, well, that's fuel additive. And then the other thing, which you and I have talked a lot about, is lubricity, with like the CP4s. And when the CP4 started having problems and it was found that it was lubricity related, well, a lot of those guys that believe the myth that you don't need a fuel additive were looking all of a sudden for a lubricity additive, but didn't want to admit that it was a fuel additive. So at the end of the day, the way we formulated a Hot Shot Secret is we always are trying to attack problems and either increase performance or solve problems. So we don't put anything in the bottle that we don't believe in. If we didn't feel it was doing anything or needed, we wouldn't put it in the bottle. And the best way to kind of explain that is that we fully formulate the product, meaning we don't put any fillers in there. So every drop in there is an additive. So if we were to take something out, something else has to go in. If we wanted to add something, something has to come out. Every single drop in the bottles that we make has a purpose. When it comes to diesel fuel additives, without going deep into it, because you and I have before, actual components of it, our main diesel fuel additives, like our Diesel Extreme and our everyday diesel treatment, they've got 6 ingredients in them. It's a cetane booster. Do you need it? I'd say so. The higher the cetane, the more complete burn you're going to have of the fuel. Can you get by without a cetane boost? Certainly. Are you going to have worse mileage? Are you going to have rougher starts? Are you going to have a poor idle? Yeah. Could you survive doing that? Yep. Is life better with your cetane higher? You betcha. Just go try some California fuel that's 50 cetane versus, some Ohio fuel that we get here that's at like 40 cetane. So that's the one part. Lubricity, we've beat that like a dead horse, of course. We know how dry the ultra low sulfur diesel fuel is. So wouldn't you want to raise the lubricity in that? We know it can help save CP4 pumps because the only thing lubricating that fuel system is the fuel itself. So when we're getting this really dry, 500 wear scar fuel out of the pump, certainly adding lubricity to that is beneficial. So I'd argue you need that. Injector cleaner, fuel system, cleaner. We know IDs, internal diesel injector deposits, are becoming a big problem. Certainly with a lot of the bio that's going in the fuel now that's creating other issues, it's important to keep these systems clean. And then we talked about anti-gel, of course. You don't want your fuel freezing, so I'd say that's a need to have anti-gel in there. So all of these components that we put in are for one of two reasons: either to treat the poor fuel that we're getting from the pump, again, raise lubricity, raise the cetane, make sure it doesn't freeze, or we're protecting the fuel system, which we know how expensive these diesel fuel systems are. So, stuff that we do for that would be like putting the injector cleaner in there, keeping the system clean, adding a water demulsifier to treat the water. Do you have a water separator on your truck? Yeah. Is it beneficial to add a demulsifier, which shocks the fuel and drops the water out of solution, so you're just feeding that water separator to make it even more efficient? Sounds like something you need to me. And then finally, the sixth component is the fuel stabilizer. The rest of all that falls apart if the fuel doesn't stay stabilized. And as we've talked in the past, fuel can start to go bad in as early as 30 days, and it usually takes roughly 30 days to get from the refinery to the pump. So hopefully you're getting fuel at a high turnover place, so it's fresh fuel. But even the freshest fuel starts to oxidize pretty quickly. So having a stabilizer in there sounds like something you need to me, So the old myth of you don't need this stuff, I would argue you do.
The part about this that really hits home is I talk with shop owners from time to time, and we can be discussing any part of owning a truck. Sometimes it's performance, sometimes it's maintenance, but a lot of the things you say, they echo. And they're not in the business of selling. I mean, I'm sure they sell them or they have them at the shop, but their main business is either performance or repair, swapping out engines, doing, turbo kits, transmissions, things like that. It's not a core part of their business. So one of the things that I see is anywhere out there is when fuel additives are discussed, people will say, well, it's a fuel additive manufacturer. Of course they're going to tell me that I need it. And right. I kind of point to the dozens or hundreds of conversations over the years I've had with shop owners that are telling me, hey, you can use any brand you want. Make sure it's a quality brand. You need to put something in there. The fuel quality sucks out there. This is going to save you from paying me $9,000 to $12,000 for a new fuel system. Or the biodiesel composition is adding more water to the fuel, and this is what's happening. So when I hear different parts of the industry echoing the same sentiment, and that's not their core business, then it tells me, hey, this is an issue. It's not just, hotshot secrets, Kyle telling me I need this. These are professionals that work on hundreds of trucks a week or every couple of weeks or a month that are saying, I see some common failures with diesel trucks, and it's coming back to this particular issue. So that's what jumps out to me with, I'd say, that first myth is how many professionals in this industry say the same thing you just said.
Well, and to jump on that too, the lubricant industry is largely to blame for that as well. There's a lot of poor lubricants out there, and historically, I feel like the industry is getting better now. We really like competing to have the best product available. Like, we love this stuff, like we formulate to the T as much as we can get performance wise. But there's a long period there where fuel additives got a bad name, and they were snake oil, and they were just poor products that were put out to people. So people have a bad taste in their mouth over additives. So it's already an uphill battle for someone in my space. Now, yeah, it is my job to market and sell additives, and I've got to fight through that noise, and that's what we always try to do. That's why we come on, diesel podcasts and stuff. We try to educate people, and we put our science out there, we put our data out there, and we deal with the competition. And what I found is you're not going to win everybody over, and people have had bad experiences, so it's something that they don't forget. And what I always try to remind people is, the lubricant industry is no different than every other industry. There's new technologies coming out with turbos and injectors and, fuel systems and suspensions and wheels and tires. I mean, everybody's got new technology, but for some reason, people tend to think that the lubricant industry is what it is. And I remember how bad that stuff is that I tried a long time ago. We've evolved so much, and have new modern technology coming out in the lubricant industry, I would say faster than these other hard part companies are. So if you've had a bad experience, I get it. I've had bad experiences with poor products in my past as well. Just understand that there are some companies out there, Hot Shot Secret is one of them, that really takes pride in what we make, and we're really trying to carry the flag for the lubricant industry and push the guys out that are putting bad products on the shelf. And the best way we can do that is kind of have an open door, have an open conversation, educate people as to why we're putting these ingredients in and what they actually do. So that's what we try to do.
I think that the part that really strikes me is the quality of fuel and how it can vary. You've talked about it with us before, and the testing that you guys do from different stations all over. I've had other companies that aren't related to Hot Shot Secrets tell me the same thing, that the fuel quality can be hit or miss. And where it would really hit me as a diesel truck owner is the expensive repairs, especially on newer trucks. Like, it's expensive on a 12 valve, but not as expensive as it is on a 6.7 Power Stroke or an L5P or a new 6.7 Cummins with all the components. Is I just think if I can help eliminate some of that risk or some of the issues, I want to do everything I can and have a complete approach to it. There's a lot of great fuel systems that are out there that people can purchase. There's so many different ways to address it, but if the fuel is just not at the level that it needs to be, I don't think it matters what hard parts or what filter systems you put on the truck. If it's bad fuel, it's going to be bad fuel. And so that's where I think it really kind of hits home. It's just how much variance there is out there. And if I can help eliminate wear and not have to spend thousands of dollars on a CP4 and injectors and everything else, I'm going to do what I can. Well,
in one point that I know you brought up in the past, and this, kind of sticks with this first myth we were discussing of, do you really need this stuff? A lot of people might be fortunate that they're getting good fuel. There is good fuel out there too, and it's hard to find. It's getting harder to find, but you might be getting good fuel that doesn't need as much treatment, and bless you if you do. We certainly want to prevent, any issues of getting any bad fuel, but it's the person who does get bad fuel for the first time, and once they experience that, they start to research a little bit more about additives, and we find new adopters of the product and stuff. Unfortunately, it's because they had a bad experience with fuel, but sometimes people learn the hard way on that. And then the other thing is, which you've mentioned in the past also, is whether you believe the fuel you're getting is good or bad or not. Sometimes people have an older truck, and they have a truck that was built before they even switched to low sulfur and ultra low sulfur diesel. So they've got an older truck, and at that time they never saw the future that they were going to be pumping dry fuel into this, in 10, 20 years from now. Yeah. So that person, it's hard for that person to deny. I mean, that truck was built for a completely different fuel. So you certainly, at least on those older trucks, need to be bringing the lubricity up to what the standard was when they were built. So it's hard to argue that one for those people, to me, that they should see that they need to be treating their fuel.
Yeah, it applies to older ones, and newer trucks. What's another common one that you come across?
So the other big one off the top we always hear is, and this goes back to how expensive these trucks are now. People get a new truck, $100,000 diesel trucks, and they get warranties on them, and they say, I don't want to void my warranty. Will diesel fuel additive that'll void my warranty? And the truth is that's also a myth. Uh, there's nothing in a diesel fuel additive, and I got to speak to Hot Shot Secret, in particular. There's nothing in our fuel additives that will void any warranty. There are some chemistries that are used in some fuel additives that can potentially be harmful to a fuel system if not used properly. But they're usually, how do I put it? They're the cheaper way of doing things. It's like they might have some type of result, but you're kind of, hurting stuff on the way there, if you will. So some of your poor additives out there might be using those type of chemistries. Speaking for Hot Shot Secret in particular, we don't use any ash. We use no sulfur. We use no metallics. We use no alcohol. So some of the chemistries out there that actually have results and can, degel fuel, it can add lubricity, but at what cost? So all of the products that we make at Hot Shot Secret go through a rigorous no harm testing. So it's part of the R&D process in developing products. They go through third-party testing, and then we have really tight QC, quality control measures, both from our chemical providers that we are purchasing raw chemicals from. We hold them accountable and require QC testing on the raw chemicals that come in. Then we in-house test everything. Maybe I can share with you after, and we can share some photos or something of some of our lab machines that we use just to test the raw goods before we even start the blending process of building these additives. And then we also have multiple steps of QC along our line, from the production line all the way out to every batch number. We literally have a sample of every batch we've ever made in the history of this company, which is insane. There's a bottle of every batch. So we can go back 12, 15 years and pull a batch number and know and actually test the chemistry that's right in there. So that all gets submitted and so that we have a proof of a safe product. Now, the other thing that I always want to tell people is you won't have anybody, you're not going to have anything in your manual that recommends you to use an additive. The manufacturers, the OEM builders, that they don't have interest in that. There are some marketing arrangements that a couple of the brands have. And so a lot of people will say, oh, Cummins recommends this product or something. They don't really recommend it. They have a marketing agreement that allows them to say, oh yeah, you can use that product, but go ask them if you can use any other product. They won't say no because they can't. And this also applies probably to, and here's the ultimate fail-safe. This applies to a lot of the other companies that you talk about, that you talk to on your program, pretty much any aftermarket part. And the Magnuson-Moss Act, there's I always mix that one up. So the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act, it's from like the 70s. It's like 1972, this Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act went in. And what it does, what was happening was the OEMs were basically holding people hostage to buy their parts. So you had to buy their parts. You couldn't go to an AutoZone and buy a control arm or a tie rod. You'd have to go to the dealership and buy an OEM, and that essentially would kill the entire aftermarket. We have a multi-billion-dollar aftermarket that supports the automotive industry. And the reason why that exists is because the manufacturers cannot make you buy their parts, and you're protected by law from that. And the Magnuson-Moss Act actually puts the burden on the OEM manufacturer, not the consumer. And they actually give them protection. The consumer's protected from this. So should you ever have an issue with your, and let's take our products in particular, a diesel fuel additive. If you put a diesel fuel additive in your truck and the manufacturer wants to say that something happened to your truck and it's because you put a fuel additive in it and they're not going to cover your warranty because of it, well, boy, they're gonna have a long day, because this act specifically puts the burden on the OEM manufacturer to prove that whatever aftermarket part or maybe product you poured in, it is on their burden to show how that damaged their system outside of warranty, and they can't back your warranty. You see Magnuson, Moss, any of these OEM guys, and they usually put their tail between their legs pretty quickly because they know they don't have a leg to stand on. Now, if you have a bad part, if you have an aftermarket part that caused damage, if an additive caused damage, then it should be held accountable. But the fact, the thought that any additive will void my warranty if I use it, period, let alone if there's something goes wrong or not, I can't put it in because it's a new truck under warranty, just flat out myth. Not only is it a myth, but you actually have legal federal protection to use additives in any OEM warranted vehicle.
That's an interesting one. I can imagine with the cost of trucks being so high that people are more sensitive to not just this, but really anything they due to their trucks or anything that they put on. But it goes back to the quality of fuel. I mean, how much can that vary from station to station? And what are you getting from station A versus station D or E or something like that? There's so much variance in it. It's really interesting with this topic because it has I think because of the long history of it, there can be misconceptions. And you talked a little bit about the history of fuel additives and how someone's experience in the early 2000s or the 90s or however long ago forms their whole opinion. We don't understand how things progress or the R&D or the technology, like you mentioned. When I think of technology, I'm guilty of it. I think of turbos. I think of transmissions. I think of tuning. I think of engine builds. I'm not aware, and I just don't know how much is going into these fuel additives versus what was on the market, 10, 20 years ago, however long it might have been. So it's really interesting to hear kind of these myths that you gather at shows or you guys hear on the phone. So I'm looking forward to hearing maybe some more of these that, maybe I have some of them. Maybe I think some of these myths. I'm not sure. What's the next one you got?
To a standpoint, like it's kind of what you, and again, we're in a weird industry. I certainly can't think of any other industry where people like literally brag about the fact that they're using really old technology. Like people get excited about, oh, I use that because my daddy used it, my daddy's daddy used it, and we've been using that stuff for 50 years. Same product. You'll never hear anybody say that about any hard part or other technology. Like nobody gets excited and brags about, oh yeah, I haven't changed my ways in 40 years. I'm still using a turbo from 1980. Like nobody says that, So lubrication is one of those weird ones where some people take pride in that in some fashion, and it also happens to be one of the ones that's advancing the most technology right now too. So it's that's my life though, Patrick. I'm always trying to weave that needle there. I give you another myth that we kind of talked about I don't know if it was last time I was on, a couple times ago. And this is a good diesel fuel additive myth that I hear all the time, that you don't really need a diesel fuel additive because I can just put transmission fluid in and that will lubricate my fuel just fine. Or two-cycle oil. We also hear that too. Like people put trans fluid in, ATF, and two-cycle oil, and kind of goes back to one of those, I've been doing it a long time, my daddy's done it, and that certainly is a myth. Now, of course, what somebody putting trans fluid or two-cycle oil in diesel fuel is attempting to do is to bring that lubricity up. Obviously, as we've talked about, all the other things that we put into fuel additives more than just lubricity, with cetane and injector cleaner and demulsifier and stabilizer, all the other stuff. But if you're just looking at lubricity, sometimes people are using trans fluid and two-cycle oil. So to dispel that myth, we covered this last time. I kind of wanted to pull the lubricity chart on it. This is when we did a fuel comparison. We took a base sample that The baseline of the fuel we tested, and this is an ASTM D6079 test, a very common lubricity fuel test. The baseline fuel was a 609, which is crazy dry, like off the charts dry. So we started with a really dry fuel, and we threw, I don't know, 20 additives at it, and we'll forget all the competitor additives. What I want to focus on is while we were doing this, we threw the transmission fluid in the test as well, and we also threw 2-cycle oil. So the baseline fuel was a 609.5. We treated it with a 2-cycle oil, and it went from 609 to 601. So you're talking virtually nothing. It made virtually no impact on the fuel. It remained just as dry. And that was at a 1 to 200 treat rate, which is a ton, like our standard EDT treat rate is 1 part to 1,600 parts of fuel. So you're doing 1 drop to every 1,600 drops of diesel fuel. We put a ton of the 2-cycle oil in, 1 to 200, an 8 times bigger dosage, and it only moved the fuel from 609 to 601. So it doesn't bring lubricity to the fuel. 2-cycle oil does not do it. I know you think it is because you're putting oil in there, and it doesn't work that way. The other one we tried was Max Life transmission fluid. Again, at a 1 to 200 treat rate. And the reason why we poured that much in was because, again, we weren't getting any gains and we wanted to show some movement. The trans fluid was better than the 2-cycle oil. So it moved the wear scar from a 609 baseline to a 488. So we had some gain with it. Trans fluid can bring some lubrication, but the amount that you have to put in just to get to that level at a 1 to 200 treat rate is why the other side of trans fluid and 2-cycle oil doesn't really work, is because it becomes too expensive then. And if you're spending that much on putting that much trans fluid or 2-cycle oil in, we can get the same job done and further with an ounce of additive. So our EDT brought that 609 down to a 426 with a 1 ounce dosage versus what would effectively be almost 3 quarts of trans fluid. Our LX4 product, which is just our lubricity only product, brought it from a 609 down to a 211 wear scar, which is just, we love seeing that because that's nice and protected. And that's at a 1 to 1280, treat rate. So we can do it with less product, more affordable product, and have better gains. So no, trans fluid and 2-cycle oil is a myth that it's cheaper and better than using a diesel fuel additive.
Hey, Diesel fans, I wanted to let you guys know that our friends over at Kershaw Knives have a 40% off MSRP code for you. If you go to kershaw.kaiusa.com, use code 25TDP40, get you 40% off MSRP. It's a great way to save some money, get some cool gear if you're in the market for a new EDC knife, something for hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house. They've got you covered with a bunch of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, different opening mechanisms, different handle designs, and their whole lineup's designed to meet any budget that you might have. So we really appreciate them offering that discount code just for Diesel Podcast listeners. If you're in the market, head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com and use code 25TDP40 to get 40% off MSRP. So that's the two sides of it then. Would either be hardly any movement, like 609 to 601, or if you do drop it to, I think it was 488, the amount that you're having to use to treat it compared to 1 ounce.
Right.
I mean, it's a pretty big difference.
It just doesn't make cost sense at that point,
It's really interesting because I've heard that one for a long time, and kind of old habits die hard, and you hear that one about using it. But I think that's good information because if you just jump online and start searching fuel additives, you're going to come across some post from 2006 on some forum out there that is specializing in diesel trucks where somebody uses it or recommends it, or you're going to hear it different places. So I think understanding the two sides of it, definitely helps. What's maybe a common one that I guess maybe you would hear from shops or maybe from professionals or some other myth that it's from people who are working on these trucks all the time that maybe they don't know, or you wish that they did.
Well, one of the big ones that I hear all over the place, usually it's more consumer. I know the consumer feels this when they're on the retail shelf and they're looking at the chemical aisle and there are just a billion bottles there and it's confusing. It's tough to figure out. Um, but it's the same sentiment that our shop owners feel. Bless their hearts. I love all of our dealers. I love all of our shops. But they openly, especially the ones that work really closely with Hot Shot Secret, uh, they usually start off saying they know a lot about lubricants. And then as we try to educate them, they usually tell us a year or two later, like, I really didn't know as much as I thought I did, but I do now. And we love to educate. So when you're looking at a fuel additive and trying to compare like what to buy, one of the biggest problems in the industry is literally like the physical like view of it, like the big jug for $20, and it does a big jug with a great price on it. Is that really giving you value? Um, I've always said Hot Shot Secret is not the cheapest product out there. We we've been thought of as being an expensive product, and I argue that we actually are probably one of the most affordable additives on the shelf. Uh, Certainly for the performance that we provide, in the bottle. But you have to look at treat rate, and people don't look at treat rate enough. And this is also one of the problems of the industry that started this way for many, many years. And to this day, a lot of the additive companies put a ton of filler in the product, and it's a lot of just solvent. So it's no harm stuff. It's not going to hurt anything, but all it is like basically watering down the bottle so that you perceive to have a lot more. And I'll even tell you, this was kind of one of the things that stunted the growth of Hot Shot Secret back in the day, when we were just getting into retail stores. And our founder at the time, Chris, was a one-man show trying to tell these retailers like, hey, this should be on your shelf. And they were telling him, well, our common bottle, that like a 16-ounce bottle of everyday diesel treatment, they would tell him that's great. It's a $20 bottle. Well, the guys that come into our shop here, if they're spending $20, they want to go home with the big jug. And our mentality is like, well, I don't really care what size it is and what it costs. Well, how much does it actually treat, and what does it cost per treat?
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like when we're at the grocery store. A lot of the times we're lucky that, the little tags there tell you like, well, what's this breakdown per bag or per ounce? And it allows you to kind of give you a more apples to apples comparison of the product you're getting. Because at the end of the day, you're paying for the actual active ingredients in there, if you will. So with our 16-ounce bottle of EDT, this will treat 400 gallons. I know I do have some data here. I'm not going to call anybody out tonight, but one of a very competitor to us that has a bottle that is 3 times or twice the size of this. So it's a quart bottle. The quart bottle treats 100 gallons, and we're treating 400 with half as much. So now all of a sudden, if that bottle's $15 and this bottle's $20, who's more expensive? Technically, we're a lot more affordable because we can treat a bunch more fuel with that same treat rate, And I don't think people look at treat rate enough, and it's tough to compute half the time. And when you're looking at the shelf, again, look at the retail shelf, or when I'm talking to one of our dealers in our shops, they tell me, they're like, we always thought we were getting a good value out of this product because, it doesn't cost that much and we get a ton of the stuff, until we started realizing, how much little additive actually goes into something. And it's just, there's no different really with a lot of the chemistry that a lot of the manufacturers are using in additives, but it really differs on how much solvent they're adding to their product. Now, we're super proud that at Hot Shot Secret, we had 0 solvent. Everything is 100% pure additive, but it also became a marketing problem for us. Like, people couldn't understand that this is treating 400 gallons. And so at the end of the day, I think the cost per treat, let me give you that one. It's, so cost per treated gallon of EDT at retail pricing comes out to 3 cents per gallon. So when you filling up to get all those 6 ingredients in there at the maximum level that the EPA allows us, and it tests number 1 in each one of those categories, it's going to cost you 3 cents a gallon. So it's like going from your $3.75 a gallon diesel fuel for $3.78 a gallon for 3 cents more. You can get quite a bang for your buck in protecting the system and improving the fuel. The next 3 largest additives out there cost at the same size bottle, cost 15 cents per gallon, 17 cents per gallon, and 7 cents per gallon. So at least twice, if not 5 times as much. But when this is $20 and the big jug is $10, it looks like this is a deal. But in all that, you're only getting a little bit of additive out of that, and a lot of filler that you're actually paying for. So it's important to really look at treat rate and do the math on it. I wish we could market that better and actually have like the like the grocery store does, but you just don't get that at the auto parts store.
Yeah. Well, I think, but it's important, I think, bringing that up to someone who is shopping or comparing what they want to use. I think especially, I think of shops a lot, and I think of them stocking it, storing it, all the trucks they're seeing per week, where that treat rate really starts to shine for them is like, what if you're working on 30 trucks a week? Oh, and all these other things, and you're talking about, double to 5 times as much more product you need and more that you have to stock, and space is limited. And
it's funny you say that. You just reminded me of a story. I had a new dealer that was just starting up with us, and they were switching from a different product. And probably my fault. I should have asked a little more questions about how much business they do, how many bays, and how much. But they were stocking up on diesel fuel additive. And one of the things that a lot of our dealers do, rather than sell like our bottles to their customer, they offer like fuel system treatments. So you might take your truck in to do like a deep fuel system clean of your diesel system. And what they're actually doing is treating it with Diesel Extreme, and they're using our product as a service product, if you will. Those guys, a lot of times, will buy our products in like 5-gallon jugs, drums, totes of the stuff, and they're using it on the service side. Well, this dealer I recently brought on was switching products over to us, and he ordered 2 drums of additive. And what he said, and it's a big operation, and he was running through basically 2 drums of additive per month on his old stuff. Well, when he got switched to our stuff, I reached back out to him because I had it in my notes, and I wanted to see how his first month went and if he was ready to reorder a couple more drums and how's it going. And he realized he wasn't as big as he thought, because the 2 drums he had barely even used a quarter of the drums because the treat rate was so different. And he went from using 2 drums a month to 2 drums actually lasting him 4 months. So all of a sudden he was like, man, I thought a little bad about it first because it was really expensive to buy your drums versus the last one, but the treat rate is so much different that we have to use a quarter as much as we used to get better results. And now this is going to last me 4 months. It's actually more affordable than I thought. It's a better price than I was paying for the stuff I had to keep refilling every single month because there was so much filler in it,
Yeah. That's interesting. And one, it also trickles down to, the truck owner out there. How much do you need to use? How long will that bottle last? So I think that's a really good point. One thing that I hear a lot, I think this would be a myth because we've talked about it before, is if a little is good, a lot is better. And I wanted to ask you about that because we hear the benefits. We've been on the Hot Shot Secret website or listened to this podcast or other things that you guys do, and we understand the benefits, and we think, okay, great, I'm getting lubricity, I'm raising cetane, I'm taking care of water emulsification, things like that. Well, what if I double or triple or quadruple the dose? Like, is that going to be even better for my truck? So what would you say about that?
That is probably my favorite one, and I get that one a lot. So this one I'm going to have to call a myth with an asterisk, and it needs some explanation. So there is the old adage, if a little's good, a lot must be great. I think that applies to like Lindsay's cheesecake strawberry thing she made yesterday. They were excellent. We could go as many of those as we can eat. That's great. When you're dealing with a fuel additive and the chemistry behind it, this kind of ties back to what we just talked about treat rate and solvent and fillers in the product. So if you are buying an additive that has a lot of solvent in it, so it's basically watered down. The active ingredients are in there, but they're watered down with a lot of solvent, so your treat rate is a lot larger. You might be putting in that dosage as they recommend, and say you liked it. Say, you felt your injectors cleaning out, you felt a little cetane boost, like, hey, this product feels like it's doing something here. My next fill up, I'm going to double it because, maybe if I put a lot more in, it's going to start feeling better. And guess what? Sometimes when you double that, you feel more gain. And you're like, that's funny. Why would they suggest only using so much if I'm actually feeling like there's more gain when I put more in here? And the reason is because you're actually getting more of that active ingredient in a watered down product. And so theoretically, in those type of situations, when it's for lack of a better term, when it's a poor additive, you can get more gain by putting more in. Now, what that also means is we already know it's a huge treat rate because there's a ton of solvent in there. And now you're putting so much more in. You're almost done with this giant bottle just to squeeze out the gain you were looking for in the first place, So now all of a sudden it's twice as expensive as you originally thought because you're using it at twice the dosage. One thing we tell everybody at Hot Shot Secret Product, and we're very proud of this, we recommend strictly sticking to our treat rates that we put on the bottle. And the reason why we do that is what I just said earlier. We don't have any filler in the product. There's no solvents. There's no way to, carrying agents that they overdose to make it, bigger. We are pure additive attacking those problems directly. So when they engineer the treat rate, we can actually take this product all the way to where the gain curve starts to level off, because there's diminishing returns on everything. You can't just keep adding cetane to something. You can't make a 300 cetane fuel by keep pouring this in. It'll level off. Stabilizer, it levels off. You can get so much, and then it's going to stabilize the fuel for a year to 2 years. If you keep putting stabilizer in, it's not going to stay good for 10 years. So there's diminishing returns on every part of these additives. Now, what we do here, since we're working with pure additive and we can recommend and control the dosage rate, they set those chemical levels of every one of those 6 components right at the proper dosage, that you're getting everything you can out of that particular chemical, whether it's the lubricity side or the injector cleaner side or the cetane side, whatever it may be, without wasting any money. So right when that gain curve starts to settle out, that's where they set the dosage rate at. And then they go to the next part of it, the injector cleaner. How much can we put in and still keep getting gain until it starts to level off? So our dosage rates on our products are set right to the peak of the gain curve. If you were to add more to it, you are literally just wasting money. Now, it's not going to hurt anything. Again, like we talked about earlier, we have harm-free products. Overdosing, most of these additives are not going to hurt anything. You just aren't going to gain anything. So for a very highly formulated fuel additive, you certainly do not want to overdose it just because it's going to hit you in the pocketbook. There are a couple aspects that the gain curve still continues a little bit. Cetane, you can get a little bit more out of, but if you overdose, but it levels off pretty quickly. And lubricity is the same thing. So we've talked in the past about a lot of people top treating with LX4. They want a little extra lubricity in there. Lubricity is one that you can kind of keep pouring in and keep lowering that wear scar. It just becomes a cost question at what point, is enough. But generally everything else, like the cleaner that we put in, we max out what the EPA allows us to put in there. So if you double that, it's not going to clean any better. It's going to be clean. Like once it's clean, it's clean. So you're just wasting cleaner at that point. Stabilizer, like I said, it's going to be stabilized for a year. You can keep putting stabilizer in. It's not going to stabilize it any longer. You're just wasting product. Water demulsifier, same thing. We set it right at the dosage rate. It's going to shock the amount of fuel that it's designed to treat. If you put extra in, well, it's already shocked all the fuel. You're just wasting it, So it's one of those things where it's just on a poor fuel additive, you might get gain because you're pouring extra of a water product in, but a good fuel additive, the gain curve is set right at the treat rate. Now, there's one caveat to that. The only one where this doesn't apply, where you actually can do wrong, you can do damage, is with anti-gel. And we're in that tail end of the season right now where we kind of run into this, now and then. Anti-gel, especially wax modifiers like that we use, it's the high-end way from keeping wax from clumping together to build up that clogs your filter. That's how we keep the anti-gel, the fuel flowing. Anti-gel actually not only has a diminishing returns, if you keep putting it in there, it actually has negative returns. So the whole goal of an anti-gel is to lower the pour point, lower the cold filter plugging point, of that fuel. So let's say if that fuel raw was going to freeze at, treated from the refinery, from the pump, it might freeze at 20 degrees. Our goal with an anti-gel is to lower that freeze point. So we want that fuel to move from 20 degrees starting to gel. Let's take it down to 0 degrees. So you have a little more cushion there for a colder climate. If you add a little more anti-gel to it, you can probably get it down to -5, -10. Like, there's a point where if you keep pouring it in, it starts coming back up. -5, +5, 10, 20. You pour that whole bottle in, you may have just put nothing in the fuel, and you could bring the actual freeze point of the fuel right back up to 32 degrees. So it's very, very important, not because of the cost, not because of the waste of money, not because of any of these other issues. Anti-gel should not be overdosed because of the negative returns on it. And it could end up, and we hear it, Patrick, a lot when, like I said off the top, like anti-gel is one of the ones that a lot of people do use, like a lot of the additive world that they don't touch. Anti-gel is one, and it's usually the people that aren't too educated on it. Maybe in these months we've had in the past where like the cold snap hit down in the South and these people aren't used to using it.
Yeah.
Well, they say, well, okay, I'm going to put some in. It's going to get down to 20 degrees, but next day it's like, it's going to get -10. Oh, I'm going to put some extra in because it's going to be extra cold. So I need some extra anti-gel. And what they ended up doing was raising the cold filter plugging point and going the opposite way. So the adage of if a little's good, a lot's great, that's certainly a case where that's certainly a myth, and it could be actually dangerous with anti-gel. You could be doing more harm than good.
I think with a lot of these myths, the big thing that I'm getting from it is to understand my cost to treat and then understanding my dosage for the reasons you just mentioned and how that affects the cost, which is I don't want to say it's a myth, but it's one of the objections that I'll hear is the cost of treating fuel. It's good enough at the pump. I'm already paying X amount per gallon. Why do I want to add a cost on top of it? And that's where I think the education is so important to understand what are you actually paying for per gallon at the pump? What quality is it? What is your fuel system requiring? And what are some issues that can exist, whether it's weather and temperature dropping? And it all kind of fits together. Conversations like this help it kind of all fit together. So these myths kind of relate back to the education and understanding why it's so important. And I think the demand for it, which is really unique in the diesel aftermarket automotive segment, is why this is also important for the older trucks. It's not just the newer ones, it's the older ones that were designed to run on a different kind of fuel, that have different hard parts in the injection pump and other components. Understanding why it's important for those trucks as well, because things tend to, being around racing and all that kind of stuff, and the trucks and the people, so things kind of work in segments. You have like the newer trucks, the older trucks. It's like this huge trend to go back to older because they're simpler. There's less emission systems on them. Yeah, but you also, they were designed to run on something else, and anywhere you fuel up is not going to have the same quality of fuel as 1997. So right. How are you going to how you going to treat that. So I love how it applies to a huge part of diesel truck ownership.
Yeah, and to your initial point in there too, like the affordability of it. I challenge everybody who's never tried a fuel additive to actually one time do the math on it. One time do the math on on the stuff that we can measure. The where we're reducing, these other things that we're doing, those are long-term measures. You know, those are things you don't see or feel right away. You're grateful when your CP4 is still lasting after 150,000 miles. But at mile 6, you don't really feel that yet, you know? So a lot of these things have long-term, you know, returns on it. But for those that might believe in some of these myths, that might believe I don't need one, there's better ways to do this, you know, et cetera. I challenge you to try a product like EDT and do the math on it. Take the time. If you spent the money on a diesel truck and you love your truck and you want it to last for a long time, and you're wondering if this is even worth it or if this is even snake oil or anything else, take a $20 test. Go buy a bottle of EDT and actually do the math on it. First of all, calculate your cost per treat. It's going to come out to about 3 cents per gallon. All those aspects that we talked about that people sometimes believe are myths, well, the one you can measure pretty quickly is your mileage. So if we can get the treat rate and the cost per treat at 3 cents per gallon, the amount of mileage gain that you need to get to pay for that product is minimal. We generally see a 3 to 5% increase in mileage. If you get 1%, if you get 1% mileage, and you know you've got a truck that's getting 15 miles a gallon, and you can get up to 16.5, well, that 1% is going to pay for the product. So, and I promise you're going to get at least that. So when you get the product paid for, now I took it off the table that it's not even the cost thing now. Now the product is essentially free in your mileage gain, and then can you argue that the rest of those benefits that can protect the system and treat the poor fuel we get are not beneficial? To me, I don't know why every single human being that has a diesel truck doesn't use an additive, but I think a lot of it's because of some of these myths that have been developed over the years. So I challenge people to have an open mind, check out some of the new technology that's going on in the lubricant world, put pen to paper, do like your hard mileage, measure your mileage, measure how much it costs to treat, and I bet you'll see that in those numbers, these products are not only affordable, but a lot of times they pay you to use them, and you certainly get the benefit in the long run from having a fuel system that's protected and lasts a long time without any maintenance.
It's helpful to go through them. I think the education and understanding it is so crucial. Where can people, if they want to learn more about one of the products, or if they're watching us on YouTube, they see the bottles in front of you, where can they go to learn more about it and even ask you questions?
HotShotSecret.com. We try to put a wealth of info on there. Each product page has science behind the product and everything. We try really hard to do a lot of content, videos that you can find on all our social media channels. Facebook, YouTube, have a lot of those videos, and of course, we have a great dealer network. So if you go to our website and click on where to buy and punch in your zip code, you can find a local dealer near you, as well as all of our retail locations that we're available at. We really try to educate our dealers too and connect to them so they can be good resources. But ultimately, we're old school too. We love phone calls. Our 800 number's right there on the website. You can call in. You can talk to our diesel techs. If it gets really escalated, we go send you to the R&D department to talk to the lab rats and the nerds over there to really diagnose what's going on. And we love keeping, like I said, like an ear to the street for that and talking to people. I always say I'm sorry that they're having a problem, but we get excited about problems because it's an opportunity for us to find a fix. And whether it's a lubricant issue that we can help with or our product or not, we have an open line and we want to help people fix their problems. And in turn, it helps us design new chemistry too. When new trucks come out and, new engines come out, a lot of times these problems aren't known or seen right away. And talking to our dealer network that sell our products and talking to the customers that might be calling in with their issues allow us to stay educated on what's out there, and if we can formulate any chemistry to help make these engines run better, longer, and last longer.
Well, I appreciate your time today, Kyle, chatting with me, educating myself and our listeners on diesel fuel additives, some myths that maybe are out there. Maybe we helped shed some light on some things. So it's always really cool to chat with you, learn about this. I know your busy season's getting ready to start up with racing and traveling and all that, and people, if they want to connect with you guys, can more than likely find you guys at one of the events out there, one of the races that are going on. So I encourage people to go chat with you if they see you, or jump on the website, call, email, ask questions. So it was great chatting with you today.
You too, Patrick. Always fun to come on, and glad we were able to bust some myths today.
Don't forget, diesel fans, make sure and head on over to Kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 25TDP40 to get 40% off MSRP. It's a great way to save some money, get some cool gear. If you're in the market for a new EDC knife, something for hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house, they've got you covered with a bunch of different choices for blade steel, handle design, opening mechanisms. Their whole lineup's really designed to meet any budget that you might have. So if you're in the market, make sure and head on over to their website and use code 25TDP40 for 40% off MSRP. Also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters: Tyler Lowen at 23 Diesel, Cutter Up Rob, Robert, all of our other Patreon supporters, all of you who subscribe on YouTube, podcast apps, follow us on social media. We appreciate all your support here in year 9 of the Diesel Podcast and look forward to bringing you more of the content that you want to hear in 2025. Till next time, keep the shiny side up.